The desert wind carried death across the endless plains of New Mexico territory. Jack Morrison pulled his worn hat lower over his weathered face as he guided his horse through the rocky canyon. 3 days without water had turned his lips to leather and his throat to sand. The Apache raids had driven most folks from these parts, but Jack had nowhere else to go. Not after what happened in Tombstone. His horse stumbled on the loose stones, and Jack felt the animal's ribs through the saddle. They both needed water soon, or the buzzards circling overhead would have an easy meal. The sun beat down without mercy, turning the rocky walls of the canyon into an oven. Jack had been a cowboy for 15 years, worked cattle drives from Texas to Montana, but nothing had prepared him for this kind of heat and isolation. As he rounded a bend in the canyon, something caught his eye. A splash of color against the red rocks that didn't belong. Jack squinted and saw what looked like fabric fluttering in the wind. He spurred his horse forward, hope rising in his chest. Maybe it was a camp? Maybe there were people with water. What he found instead made his blood run cold. An Apache woman lay crumpled against a boulder, her traditional dress torn and stained with blood. Her long black hair was matted with dirt and dried blood from a gash on her forehead. She couldn't have been more than 25, with high cheekbones and bronze skin that would have been beautiful if not for the pale pallor of someone close to death. Jack's first instinct was to ride away. Apache meant trouble, and he had enough of that already. But as he looked down at the unconscious woman, something stirred in his chest. She was someone's daughter, maybe someone's wife. Left here to die alone under the scorching sun, he dismounted and knelt beside her, checking for a pulse. It was there, weak but steady. Her breathing was shallow, and her lips were cracked from thirst. Jack looked around the canyon floor and saw signs of a struggle. Hoofprints in the sand, scattered belongings, drops of dried blood on the rocks. Someone had attacked her and left her for dead. "Well, lady," Jack muttered, "looks like we're both in a heap of trouble." He had maybe 2 swallows of water left in his canteen, not nearly enough for 2 people. But he couldn't leave her here. It went against everything his mother had taught him about treating folks right, regardless of their skin color or where they came from. Jack carefully lifted the Apache woman onto his horse. She was lighter than he expected, probably hadn't eaten much in days. Her head lolled against his chest as he mounted behind her, and he could feel how burning hot she was with fever. Whatever had happened to her, infection was setting in. The nearest settlement was Copper Creek, about 20 miles northwest. But that was Apache hunting ground. And a white cowboy carrying an unconscious Apache woman would be asking for trouble from both sides. The Army patrol station at Devil's Ridge was closer, but soldiers weren't known for their gentle treatment of Indians, especially Apache. Jack made his choice. There was an old mining camp called Bitter Springs about 15 miles south. Most of the miners had pulled out when the silver ran dry, but he remembered hearing that Doc Henley still lived there, too old and too stubborn to leave. If anyone could help this woman, it would be the Doc. The journey to Bitter Springs was the longest 15 miles of Jack's life. The Apache woman drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering words in her native tongue that he couldn't understand. Her fever was getting worse, and twice she nearly slipped from the saddle. Jack had to use his belt to secure her to him, which meant if they were attacked, he'd have a hard time reaching his gun. The sun was setting when they finally reached Bitter Springs. The old mining camp was mostly empty buildings and rusted equipment, but Jack could see lamplight in one of the shacks near what used to be the main shaft. He rode up to the door and called out, "Doc Henley!" "It's Jack Morrison. I need help." The door opened to reveal a grizzled old man with wild white hair and spectacles hanging around his neck. Doc Henley had been patching up miners and cowboys in these parts for 30 years, and his hands had seen everything from gunshot wounds to cave-ins. "Jack Morrison," the doc said, squinting in the fading light. "Thought you were up in Colorado territory." Then he saw the woman slumped against Jack's chest. "Lord Almighty, what have you got there?" "Found her in Rattlesnake Canyon," Jack said, carefully dismounting with his burden. "Someone worked her over pretty good. She's burning up with fever." Doc Henley helped carry the Apache woman into his shack, which served as both home and medical clinic. Oil lamps, cast flickering shadows on the walls lined with bottles of medicine and surgical tools. They laid her on a cot in the corner, and the doc immediately began examining her injuries. "Bullet graze on her shoulder," he muttered, probing gently. "Looks like someone pistol-whipped her, too. This head wound is nasty." He looked up at Jack with serious eyes. "Why'd you bring her here, son?" "Apache woman in these parts is liable to cause all kinds of trouble." Jack removed his hat and ran his fingers through his dark hair. "Couldn't leave her to die, Doc. Just ain't right." The old doctor nodded slowly. "Your pa raised you decent. I'll give him that." He turned back to the patient. "She's been without water for at least 2 days, maybe 3. Fever's from infection, but she's young and strong. If we can get fluids in her and clean these wounds, she's got a fighting chance." For the next 3 hours, Doc Henley worked to save the Apache woman's life while Jack helped however he could. They cleaned her wounds with whiskey, stitched the worst cuts, and forced water between her cracked lips drop by drop. Jack found himself watching her face in the lamplight, noting the strong line of her jaw and the way her dark lashes curved against her cheeks. "What do you think happened to her?" Jack asked as the doc bandaged her shoulder. "Hard to say," Henley replied. "Could have been Army patrol, could have been bandits, could have been her own people if she did something they didn't like. Apache justice can be harsh, especially for women who break tribal law. Think she make it?" Doc Henley sat back in his chair and wiped his hands on a towel. "Next 24 hours will tell. If the fever breaks, she's got a chance. If it DOESN single quotes ... He shrugged. Jack spent that night sitting beside the cot, changing the wet cloth on her forehead every hour to keep the fever down. Sometime around midnight she began talking in her sleep, urgent words in Apache that sounded like warnings or pleas. Her body thrashed weakly, and Jack had to hold her down to keep her from tearing the stitches. "Easy there," he whispered, though he doubted she could hear him. "You're safe now. Nobody's gonna hurt you." Toward morning, her fever finally broke. The Apache woman's eyes fluttered open, dark and alert despite her weakness. She looked around the unfamiliar surroundings, then focused on Jack's face hovering over her. Instead of fear or confusion, he saw intelligence in those eyes and something else. Recognition, maybe. She spoke a single word in English, her voice barely a whisper. "Why?" "Why what?" Jack asked gently. "Why help me?" Her English was accented but clear. "You are white man." "I am Apache?" Jack considered the question. It was a fair one, given the bad blood between their peoples. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "My mama always said folks are folks, no matter what they look like on the outside." The Apache woman studied his face for a long moment. "Your mama was wise woman. What's your name?" Jack asked. She hesitated, then said, "Ayana." "It means eternal blossom." That's a pretty name." "I'm Jack Morrison." "I know who you are," Ayana said, surprising him. "You are the cowboy who saved the children in Silver Creek." Jack's eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" "Apache see everything, know everything that happens in our territory. You fought off bandits who would have killed Mexican children for sport." "My people remember such things." The story she referred to had happened 6 months ago. Jack had been passing through Silver Creek when bandits attacked a small Mexican settlement. He could have ridden on, minded his own business, but something inside him wouldn't let innocent children be harmed. He'd helped the townspeople fight off the raiders, taking a bullet in the shoulder for his trouble. "Didn't think anyone saw that," Jack said quietly. "Apache always watching," Ayana replied. "We know who brings death and who brings life to our lands." Doc Henley appeared with a bowl of broth. "Well, she's talking. That's a good sign. Think you can keep some food down, young lady?" Ayana tried to sit up but was too weak. Jack helped support her shoulders while the doc spooned broth between her lips. She was stronger than she looked, managing to swallow several mouthfuls before exhaustion overtook her again. "Sleep now," Jack said. "You're safe here." But even as he said the words, Jack knew they might not be true for long. Apache woman or not, Ayana was beautiful, and beauty in these rough lands attracted the wrong kind of attention. Word would spread that Doc Henley was treating an Indian woman, and some folks wouldn't take kindly to it. The army might come looking, or worse, bounty hunters who collected Apache scalps for the territorial government. As if reading his thoughts, Ayanna gripped his wrist with surprising strength. They will come looking for me, she whispered. The men who did this. When they find I am not dead. Who were they? Jack asked. White men, wearing blue coats but not soldiers. They wanted me to tell them where my people make winter camp. Her eyes hardened with anger, and 3 days passed like a slow-burning fuse. Jack barely left Ayanna's side, taking turns with Doc Henley to keep watch while she recovered her strength. The old mining camp felt like a fortress, but Jack knew it was more like a trap. Only one way in or out, and if trouble came calling, they'd be cornered like rabbits. Ayanna healed faster than expected. Apache blood ran strong, Doc Henley observed, watching her sit up and take solid food by the second day. Her shoulder wound was knitting clean, and the head injury that had worried them most was showing no signs of infection. But it was her spirit that impressed Jack the most. Despite everything that had happened to her, she showed no fear, only careful watchfulness. Tell me about your family, Jack said on the third morning, bringing her a cup of coffee that Doc had somehow managed to brew from beans older than Moses. Ayanna accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping her slender fingers around the warm metal. Why do you ask? Curious, I guess. Don't meet many Apache folks who speak English so well. She sipped the bitter coffee thoughtfully. My father traded with Mexican merchants before the war came. He believed Apache must learn white man's ways to survive in changing world. So he sent me to mission school in Santa Fe for 2 winters. That must have been hard, being away from your people. Very hard. White children called me savage. Priests said my Apache ways were devil's work. Her dark eyes grew distant. But I learned to read and write, learned how white men think. My father said this knowledge would be weapon against our enemies. Smart man. Yes, too smart for his own good, perhaps. He tried to make peace treaty with Army colonel named Brennan. Instead of treaty, he got bullets. The pain in her voice was fresh despite the time that had passed. Jack knew the name Brennan. Colonel Marcus Brennan had a reputation throughout the territory for his brutal methods against Indians. Some called him a hero. Others said he was just another killer wearing a uniform. That why those men wanted information about your camp? Jack asked gently. Ayanna nodded, anger flashing in her eyes. They work for Brennan. He wants to find our winter sanctuary, kill everyone while snow traps us in the mountains. They thought I would betray my people to save my own life. But you didn't? Would you betray your family to save yourself? Jack thought about his own family, scattered to the 4 winds after his father's death. His brother Thomas killed in the war, his sister married and moved to California, his mother buried beside his father in Texas soil. No, he said quietly. I wouldn't. Then you understand. Doc Henley appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Jack, we got company coming. 4 riders, maybe 5. Still a mile out, but heading straight for us. Jack's blood turned to ice water. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, peering through the dusty glass. In the distance, he could see dust clouds rising from the desert floor. Riders moving fast and purposeful. Think it's them? He asked Ayanna. She struggled to her feet, still weak but determined. Let me see. Jack helped her to the window. She squinted at the approaching dust clouds, then nodded grimly. Yes, the one in front rides a paint horse. Same man who held knife to my throat 3 days ago? How many in their group originally? 5, all well armed, all mean as rattlesnakes. Jack checked his ammunition. 12 rounds in his rifle, 6 in his pistol. Doc Henley had an old scattergun and maybe a dozen shells. Against 5 professional killers, their chances weren't good. There's a back way out through the mine shaft, Doc suggested. Leads up into the hills. Might be able to slip away while they're searching the buildings. No, Ayanna said firmly. They will track us easily. Better to make stand here where we have walls and supplies. She's right, Jack agreed. Besides, running would just put off the inevitable. These men won't stop hunting until they're dead or we are. Doc Henley loaded his shotgun with shaking hands. Never thought I'd die fighting beside an Apache in a played-out mining camp. Not planning on dying today, Doc. Jack moved chairs and tables to create makeshift cover near the windows. Ayanna, there's a root cellar under that trapdoor. You should hide there until this is over. No, her voice was steel. I am Apache warrior, daughter of War Chief Red Hawk. I do not hide while others fight my battles. You're wounded and weak. You'll just be in the way. Fire blazed in her dark eyes. Give me weapon. I show you what weak Apache woman can do. Jack hesitated, then pulled a spare pistol from his saddlebags. You know how to use this? Ayanna took the gun and checked the cylinder with practiced ease. Mission school taught more than reading and writing. The riders were close enough now that Jack could count them. 5 men, just as Ayanna had said. They wore dusty civilian clothes but moved with military precision. The leader on the paint horse was a large man with a black beard and cruel eyes. Even at this distance, Jack could see the knife scar running down his left cheek. That's Ezra Cobb, Doc Henley whispered. Mean son of a gun who used to work for the mining company as a strikebreaker. Heard he'd taken up scalp hunting. The riders pulled up about 50 yards from the main building. Cobb dismounted and walked forward alone, his hand resting casually on his gun butt. Doc Henley, he called out. I know you're in there, old man. We're looking for an injured Apache woman. Word is you might have seen her. Doc moved to the door but didn't open it. Don't know what you're talking about, Cobb. Ain't seen no Indians around here. Now, Doc, we both know that ain't true. My boys found blood trail leading right to your front door. Fresh horse tracks, too. Cobb's voice carried the lazy confidence of a man holding all the cards. Just hand her over and we'll be on our way. No trouble for you? And if I refuse? Cobb laughed, an ugly sound. Well, then things might get unpleasant. Be a shame if your little medical practice went up in smoke. Accidents happen, you know. Jack positioned himself at the side window where he had a clear shot at Cobb. The other 4 men had spread out in a rough semicircle. Hands near their weapons. Professional killers, all right? They knew their business. I got a counteroffer, Jack called out, surprising everyone. How about you boys mount up and ride out of here before somebody gets hurt? Cobb turned toward the sound of Jack's voice, his eyes narrowing. Well. Jack Morrison, the hero of Silver Creek, heard you might be involved in this. He spat in the dust. You're making a big mistake, cowboy. This Apache woman is wanted for questioning in a matter of territorial security. Funny thing about that, Jack replied. She says you boys tried to murder her when she wouldn't talk. That don't sound much like questioning to me. Apache lies come easy as breathing. You ought to know better than to trust a savage. Only savage I see is you, Cobb. The black-bearded man's face darkened with anger. Have it your way, Morrison. But don't say we didn't give you a chance to do this the easy way. Cobb backed away from the building, and Jack knew the talking was over. Get ready, he whispered to Doc and Ayanna. Here they come. The attack came from 3 directions at once. 2 men circled around to the back while Cobb and another pressed forward from the front. The 5th man stayed with the horses, rifle ready to pick off anyone who tried to run. Jack's first shot took down the man approaching from the left side, catching him in the chest as he tried to kick in a boarded window. Doc's shotgun boomed, and Jack heard someone scream from the back of the building. But there were still too many of them, and they were spreading out, making it impossible to cover all angles. A window exploded inward as someone threw a rock, followed immediately by a lit torch. The dry wood of the old building caught fire instantly. Smoke began filling the room, making it hard to see or breathe. They're trying to burn us out. Doc coughed. More flames appeared at other windows. Within minutes, the front part of the building was ablaze. The trapped trio were forced to retreat toward the back room, but that put them right where Cobb wanted them. The back door crashed open, and a bearded man in a torn shirt charged in with a pistol in each hand. Ayanna's gun spoke once, and the man spun around and dropped. But the effort cost her. She swayed on her feet, the wound in her shoulder bleeding again from the strain. Can't stay here much longer, Jack shouted over the roar of flames. "Smoke's gonna kill us before the bullets do." "Mine shaft," Doc gasped. "Only way out now." They fought their way through the smoke to the trapdoor leading to the root cellar. From there, a narrow tunnel connected to the old mine workings. It was their only chance. But Jack knew Cobb would figure it out soon enough. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a man to crawl through. Doc went first with a lamp, followed by Ayanna, with Jack bringing up the rear. Behind them, the building burned with increasing fury, and they could hear Cobb shouting orders to his remaining men, the mine shaft angled upward. Carved out of solid rock by miners chasing a silver vein that had played out years ago. Side passages branched off in different directions, creating a maze of tunnels that Jack hoped would confuse their pursuers. But Apache tracking skills weren't the only talent Cobb's men possessed. At least one of them had mining experience because Jack could hear them following the main shaft with grim determination. They emerged from the tunnel into a larger chamber where mining equipment lay abandoned. Rusty pickaxes, broken wheelbarrows, and coils of rotting rope cast strange shadows in the lamplight. There were 3 exits from this chamber. Jack drove the horse hard up the rocky slope, rifle in hand and Cobb's ammunition belt slung across his shoulder. The sound of gunfire was getting more intense, and he could hear Doc Henley's voice shouting warnings to Ayanna. The old man's shotgun boomed again, followed by the sharper crack of rifles. Jack's heart pounded as he realized they were running out of time. He reached the ridge just as one of Cobb's men was flanking around the rocks where Doc and Ayanna had taken cover. The killer was focused on his targets and didn't see Jack coming until it was too late. Jack's shot took him high in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his rifle flying. The wounded man tried to draw his pistol, but Ayanna appeared from behind the rocks like an avenging spirit. Her gun spoke once, and the threat was ended permanently. "One more," Jack called out as he dismounted. "Where's Doc?" "Here," came the wheezy reply from deeper in the rocks. "Took a bullet in the leg, but I'll live." "Where's Cobb?" "Dead," Jack said grimly. "But his last man is still out there somewhere." As if summoned by his words, a rifle cracked from across the canyon. The bullet whined off the rocks near Jack's head, and he quickly took cover beside Ayanna. In the fading light, he could see muzzle flashes from a position about 200 yards away. The final killer had found high ground and was trying to pin them down. "He's got good position," Ayanna observed, wincing as she shifted to look around the boulder. "Too far for pistol, and he can see anyone who tries to move." Jack studied the terrain. The shooter was on a rocky outcrop that gave him a clear view of their position and most of the surrounding area. But there was a blind spot on the left side, where a gully cut down from the higher ridges. If someone could work their way around without being seen? "I can reach him," Jack said, already planning his route. "You and Doc stay here. Keep his attention focused this way." "No," Ayanna's voice was flat and determined. "You are hurt, bleeding. I'm better choice for this." Jack looked down at his side, surprised to see that Cobb's bullet had torn a larger groove than he'd realized. His shirt was soaked with blood, and he was starting to feel lightheaded. "You're wounded too," he pointed out. "And you're supposed to be recovering." "Apache learned to fight through pain before we learned to walk." I moved silent like shadow. "You crashed through brush like wounded buffalo." Under other circumstances, Jack might have argued. But the blood loss was making him dizzy, and he knew Ayanna was right about her abilities. Apache warriors were legendary for their stealth and endurance. "All right," he said reluctantly. "But be careful. This one's smart, or he wouldn't have lasted this long." Ayanna checked her pistol and tucked Jack's spare knife into her belt. "If I do not return in 1 hour, take the horse and go. Do not wait for me." "Not happening. We all get out of this together, or nobody does." She looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her dark eyes. "You are strange, man, Jack Morrison. Apache do not understand why you risk so much for people not your family. Maybe they're more family than you think." Before she could respond, Ayanna slipped away into the gathering darkness. Jack watched her disappear into the shadows with an almost supernatural grace. Within moments, it was as if she had never been there at all. Doc Henley crawled over, dragging his wounded leg. "She's something special, that one," he said quietly. Seen a lot of folks in my time, but never met an Apache woman who could handle herself like that. She's been through hell and back, Jack agreed, keeping his eyes on the distant muzzle flashes. But she never breaks, never gives up. Question is, what are you gonna do with her once this is over? Can't keep running forever. Jack had been wrestling with the same question. Even if they escaped these immediate dangers, there would be others. The territorial government had a bounty on Apache scalps, and men like Cobb weren't the only ones hunting for easy money. Apache women traveling with a white cowboy would attract attention wherever they went. One problem at a time, Doc, Jack said. First we get out of this alive. The gunfire from across the canyon had stopped. Either the shooter was conserving ammunition or Ayanna was getting close. Jack fired a few shots in the general direction of the outcrop, hoping to mask any sounds she might make. 20 minutes passed in tense silence. Then, just as Jack was starting to worry, he heard a single gunshot from the direction of the rocky outcrop. It wasn't repeated. Ayanna, he called softly. Here, came her voice from much closer than expected. She emerged from the rocks like a ghost, moving silently despite her injuries. It is finished. All of them? All of them. She sank down beside Jack, exhaustion finally showing in her face. We are safe for now. Doc Henley let out a long breath. Well, I'll be damned. 5 professional killers and we're all still breathing. But Jack knew their troubles were far from over. The men who had hired Cobb would send others when these didn't return. And now there would be Bottas to explain, a burned-out mining camp, and questions from the territorial authorities. We need to move, he said. Tonight, while we still have darkness to cover us. Move where? Doc asked. I can't travel far with this leg and you're bleeding like a stuck pig. My uncle's ranch in Colorado Territory? It's our best bet for laying low until things cool down. Ayanna shook her head. Too dangerous. You need doctor, and I need time to heal properly. Neither of us will survive 2 weeks on the trail in this condition. Then where? Jack asked. We can't stay here. I know a place, Ayanna said quietly. Hidden Valley in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. My people use it sometimes when we need to disappear. There is water, game, shelter. We could rest there until we are strong again. Apache territory, Jack said. Your people might not take kindly to a white man showing up uninvited. My people are not there now. They moved to winter camps in the deep desert. Ayanna met his eyes. But if they were there, they would welcome you. Word of your actions today will spread. Apache remember debts of honor? Doc Henley was already shaking his head. I can't make a journey like that, not at my age and with this leg. You young folks go ahead. I'll stay here. Tell anybody who asks that I never saw you. Doc, they'll know you're lying. These men were working for powerful people. They won't just let this slide. Maybe not. But I'm an old man, and I've lived longer than I expected to anyway. Besides, somebody needs to bury these Bottas proper, and I got nowhere else to go. Jack wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in the old doctor's eyes. Doc Henley had made his choice, and nothing would change his mind. They spent the next hour gathering supplies and tending their wounds as best they could. Doc insisted on rebandaging Jack's side and checking Ayanna's shoulder. Both were healing well, but the stress of the fight had reopened some of the cuts. As dawn approached, Jack and Ayanna prepared to leave. They had 1 horse between them, enough water for 3 days, and whatever food Doc could spare from his meager supplies. It wasn't much for a journey into the high country, but it would have to do. You sure about this hidden valley? Jack asked as they prepared to mount up. Very sure. My grandmother took me there when I was small, taught me the secret ways. It is place of power, place of healing. Ayanna's voice grew soft with memory. She said it was where broken things go to become whole again. Sounds like exactly what we need. They said goodbye to Doc Henley as the sun rose over the ruined mining camp. The old man stood in the doorway of the only building that hadn't burned, leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch. Smoke still rose from the ashes, and the smell of destruction hung heavy in the morning air. You take care of each other, Doc said gruffly. And don't come back this way until you're sure it's safe. Might be years before that happens. Thanks for everything, Doc, Jack said. We won't forget what you did. Just make sure it was worth something. Both of you deserve a chance at happiness, but you're gonna have to fight for it. Jack helped Ayanna onto the horse, then swung up behind her. She was warm and solid against his chest, and he could smell the sage and leather scent of her hair. For a moment, despite everything they'd been through, he felt a strange sense of peace. The journey to the hidden valley took 5 days. They traveled mostly at night, following game trails and avoiding the main routes where soldiers or bounty hunters might be waiting. Ayanna guided them with an uncanny sense of direction, reading signs in the landscape that were invisible to Jack's eyes. On the third night, as they rested beside a small stream, Ayanna finally opened up about her past. "The men who attacked me," she said, staring into their small campfire. "They were not first. For 2 years now, government men have been hunting me. They think I know location of great Apache treasure hidden in mountains. Do you?" "Yes," the simple word hung in the night air like a thunderclap. "My father told me before he died. Gold and silver collected over many years, taken from Spanish mines and Mexican towns. Enough to buy weapons, ammunition, maybe even peace treaty with whites." Jack whistled softly. "That's why they won't give up hunting you. That kind of treasure could change the balance of power in the territory. It could also get me killed. Knowledge is a dangerous thing when too many people want it. So what do you want to do with it?" Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know. My father's dream of peace seems impossible now. Too much blood has been spilled, too much hatred on both sides. Maybe